Here's Brody Brazil.
Okay, so what went well for the A's in 2021? And I know this sounds weird to say because everybody went through it. Every team essentially completed it. Nobody missed games. I mean, there were setbacks for individuals and there were postponed games and this and that. But how about the fact that in spring training of 21, if I looked back and told myself, hey, the A's are not going to miss a game this year. And they only had one, I believe, early on against the Tigers, which had to be postponed until the next day. They played a doubleheader, I think. They only had one game change all season long. You know, based on where we were back in February, March, and April, health-wise in this country, no vaccines yet necessarily for everybody, and the pandemic was still very much raging, and fans were slowly trickling back into stadiums. I say this respectfully now because I hope you remember this at some point. It was a positive that the season was completed for the A's and every other team across baseball. I don't want to minimize that point. How about Matt Olson's bat? No question this season went well, and not to take away from his glove. I truly believe he's going to get that third Gold Glove this offseason. Maybe not his best year defensively. Like, there have been even better, but he is still among the absolute best at what he does over there. But we're talking about the bat. And he flirted with 40, literally got 39 in game 161. I hoped he was going to, was it 160? 160. I hoped he was going to do it in that final weekend, just get to 40, because he had already had the new career high in homers. He already surpassed 100 RBI for the season. He upped his batting average this year by 80 points. And he cut his strikeout rate literally in half. And by the way, can I just say that over the course of this video, you know what, let me go to the truth camera. It's important to say that I'm not going to overwhelm you with stats. I don't have my notes. I'm pulling all this from the brain right now. There's nothing up on the screen, but I have to tell you that I don't want to make this season review and what went well all about numbers, and I don't want to be, reading from a textbook. I just want to give you the gut instinct impressions from this season. Anyway, Matt Olson's bat clearly took a step forward from 2020. If he can crank out more seasons like what he just did, I think he's going to be really happy with his MLB career. And he's doing, I think the best way to put it, he did in 2021 what everybody knows he's capable of. One of the only guys that didn't change places in the lineup, one of the only regulars this year that didn't change spots in the lineup, was pretty much always the three-hitter. I think sometimes cleanup, but always the three-hitter. So let's move on. The trade deadline, that went really well for the Oakland A's. And I think Billy Beane and David Force said the other day, they made the same reference that we had been making for a while. Their best deadline before this was probably Jermaine Dye in the early 2000s. I mean, literally their best deadline in 20 years. Starling Marte, Josh Harrison, Andrew Chafin, Yan Gomes. Those four were not the biggest pieces at the deadline. They were not the big names. You remember where they're like 10? Was it 10 or 12? There was double-digit all-stars that got traded at this year's deadline. I mean, it was a pretty pivotal deadline for all of baseball. And yeah, so the A's don't end up, with the Chris Bryants necessarily. But they got some puzzle pieces that absolutely fit their team perfectly. Now, we don't talk about this a lot because it's not on-field performance, but the front office performance at the deadline truly deserves to be remembered. And I used the reference of like Marte as a great vacation home. You saw the pictures online. You kind of knew, like all of us, I mean, especially me covering the American League all these years and the Oakland A's, I watch baseball. I know who Starling Marte is, but Billy and David also said this the other day. Same thing. They knew who he was, but nobody truly appreciated him until they watched him up close and personal every day with the Oakland A's. Marte stealing bags, getting on base, disrupting pitchers when he was on second. And Harrison, too. I'm sorry to make this all about number two, but Harrison and Yan Gomes working with the pitching staff. Andrew Chafin, the lefty out of the pen to add solidity. Or is it solidarity? Why would I use a word I'm not sure of? Anyway, those four guys, truly unbelievable. But the Marte reference, staying at a vacation house that you saw the pictures, you pretty much knew what you were going to get. You ended up loving the place. And then at a certain point, vacation ends. and nobody gets to live in a vacation house forever. So I do think there is some optimism around potentially keeping Harrison. He was only on a $1 million deal, 1 year, $1 million contract for this past season. That's ridiculous. That's among the best bargains in baseball. I certainly hope the A's can make a competitive offer to keeping him around. And others too, but in terms of affordability, let's throw that out there. Cole Irvin's season, I thought, went really well. Maybe started better than it finished and had more ups and downs, more downs than ups than he wanted. But for Cole Irvin to earn a spot in this rotation right out of spring training when they knew Fiers wasn't going to be available, he had a couple really good last starts in spring, if I remember correctly, earned that spot. Had a couple of signature performances early on. Was it the game against the Blue Jays? 8 innings. Shut him out through 8, I want to say. Gave up 2 or 3 hits. Adding a lefty to your rotation, adding a pitcher, not a thrower, but adding a pitcher to your rotation. Somebody who should be around next year, is under team control. I thought that was a really good story of the season. And the similar thing can be said. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I did put these two back to back. When James KAPRIELIAN joined the team, I believe this was after the Luzardo injury, or somewhere around May is when KAPRIELIAN joined the team, but had a couple wins out of the gate, and a guy who had been injured for several seasons. I mean, Cap came over in the Sonny Gray trade, right, to the Yankees. Like, Sonny Gray is long gone from the Yankees, and KAPRIELIAN had been in the organization for a while, was still hurt, was dealing with multiple different things. For him to have this debut, for him to latch and last all season long, and I think the same can be said about Irvin, that's what made this season for them so special. The fact that they were reliable, they were every turn contributors to the rotation. If I could say something about both these guys, but specifically KAPRIELIAN, it's a catch-22. One of the things I admired most about his work was how he battled through traffic, how he battled through jams that unfortunately he got himself into, but he got himself out of so many of these. The point being that next year, when he wants to take next steps, and this isn't a secret to anybody, if he could limit the amount of damage and trouble and hard innings that he has to pitch, that should extend him over the course of a season a lot better. He ended this year by throwing out of the bullpen. I think the team looked at him and knew that the 170-something innings he threw was a lot for him. It's more than he'd ever thrown in his life. But I don't want to diminish how good of a season he had by that. I want the focus to be Irvin and KAPRIELIAN as two things that went really well that, as for spring training, I'm not sure everybody saw coming. This also went pretty well too. Jed Lowrie of the New York Metropolitans for the prior 2 seasons. What did he play in, like 8 games? He had something like 9 at-bats between 2019 and 2020. And comes back here, hitting doubles like he didn't miss a beat, switch hitting, playing a lot of second base in the first half of the year. It's unfortunate down the stretch that the injuries caught up with him. For a while, he was only DHing. And then for a while after that, he couldn't even be in the lineup. But the fountain of youth aspect for him, and what was this, his 3rd tour of duty with the Oakland A's? Just a pretty magical story that a guy who was on the shelf that long and on the shelf that hard for 2 years comes to the Oakland A's and looks like the 2015 version of himself. Good teammate, professional, it was a treat to honestly think that you were going to get Jed Lowrie as insurance. The A's didn't have their infield situation all sorted away. Had a prior track record with him. They took a chance on Jed. Jed absolutely delivered. For a while there in the middle of summer, this guy was barreling up baseballs like nobody's business. This is a pure hitter right here to the highest degree. Also, this went well too. And I know a lot of people will look back and their first impression of Elvis Andrus was not the best with the Oakland A's. First couple weeks and months, but really probably 5-6 weeks of the season, they were rough on him. Batting well below 200. Defensively was fine, but quickly went down in the lineup to the point where he was all of a sudden hitting ninth. What's crazy about that, though, is when he turned things around, Bob Melvin kept him there, and it rewarded the team quite well. He was actually one of their most consistent hitters in the second half of the season. And I'm not talking about power like the A's typically, display, but his ability to get hits, find gaps, get balls through the infield. I thought he was very sure-handed at shortstop. The injury that he suffered in the final home series of the season, so frustrating. Rounding third base, broke his left fibula, also had some issues with a high ankle sprain, has already underwent surgery. They're saying that he should be on target for 2022, and that's the other thing. A lot of people think that, and I was victim of this too, I was guilty of this too, is, he was traded from the Rangers, and people thought, well, that's a contract year for him. No. He's under contract next season with the Oakland A's too. So having your shortstop at least settled for one more year, and I can hear people saying this already, comparing and contrasting him to Marcus Semien, and obviously we know what Marcus did with the Blue Jays this year, had a career best season, had a phenomenal season. I'm not here to make the Marcus and Elvis comparison. I'm really not. I do not want to judge Elvis directly against a different individual. I want to judge him based on what he was up against, what the A's were up against if they didn't get him, and how he performed over the course of a season. He did not let the bad start weigh him down the rest of the way. Good leader. Teammates seem to absolutely love him. I gauge a lot of things on what Bob Melvin says about players, and they were glowing at the end of the year. And we saw the last week of baseball without him. And quite honestly, it did not look the same. I could not have imagined this past A's season without the shortstop Elvis Andrus. That is definitely something that started rough, but overall big picture went well for the team this year. Tony Kemp also went well in a variety of ways. Now, he had career highs in so many different offensive categories, but to me, at-bats and games played tell the true story. Batted a bunch of different places in the lineup, was a defender in a bunch of different positions, hit 345, I want to say, in the final 45 games of the year, something like that. See, again, I'm not relying on all the stats here and pulling it off my head, but clearly, and we all saw what he did in the final weekend against Houston. Not that it mattered to the team and standings, but the point is that he got in the second half red hot, and another player who's under contract with the team, so versatile. You need guys like this. You need the plays he made defensively with a lot of flair. You need the chemistry, the glue guy inside a clubhouse. That is Tony Kemp. He's going to give you a lot of effort every single time. What did he have? A strikeout, a non-strikeout streak this year? Was it 90 at-bats? It was like 90 at-bats between strikeouts. So that to me is fantastic. I mean, even his outs were productive, putting the ball in play, making the opposition defense work. Tony Kemp had a career season based on opportunities. The A's giving him these chances and him earning these chances lets you know that he was having his best big league season. And if you look at how the A's acquired him from Chicago and how Chicago got him from Houston, what an absolute deal for the green and gold.